Hey y'all, it's Laura and welcome back to my go-to design series where we're going through each and every one of my go-to designs that I create foundations for my pages with. If you'd like to see the very first one explaining this whole series, I will link that at the very end of the video so that you can get caught up. There will be about 15 videos in this series and they'll be up every single Saturday for the next couple of months. So let's head over to the desk and see which go-to design we're doing today. So for today's go-to design, we are exploring the wreath. Now, how this is different from some of the other designs is that the entire edge is decorated in some way. So it's not just a drawn circle or any other shape, it's a decorated edge. So this is my first example. I've brought in a lot of different bits and pieces to layer onto this. I have a pattern paper here in the center of my circle. So as you can see, it's not been cut through. So I've literally cut out a circle from my pattern paper, placed it down on top, then decorated the edges that gives this background paper a recessed look. Now I've also included things like acetate, some little sprinkly bits around the outside, and even a little butterfly or two. And that's a great way to add a little bit of lift or the impression of dimension without adding a lot of 3D pieces. This heavy layering does the work for you. So for this one, I've used a cut file for my wreath, and this is a pretty quick and easy way to do it. Now this one's a little bit different in that I actually have backed the cut file with this vellum on one side and this white kind of notebook style paper on this side, and then place the entire thing onto the background. The nice thing about cut file wreaths is that the design is pretty much made for you. You don't have to really think about which is going to go where, which floral fits best in this area, making sure there's balance as far as the size of the florals. That's already built in. You do need to think about the colors that you're using to back this sort of cut file. You'll notice that I pretty much stuck to 3 or 4 main colors. So I have a pink, a yellow, a blue, and a kind of an orangey red. And that's pretty much the only colors I used on the whole thing, aside from a little bit of teal for the leaves. And keeping a very simple basic color scheme allows the entire thing to feel cohesive, and it's very easy to embellish because again, the work's done for you with this beautiful cut file. Now again, I have layered some butterflies on top. Butterflies and florals just seem to go together in my opinion, and I've kept my embellishing fairly simple outside of the wreath itself. With this next layout, we've gone with a different approach. Now this was a wreath that was built in to the background paper itself. So what I've done here is fussy cut the inside only of the wreath and then backed it with this beautiful navy paper. So as you can see, I've just put another piece of paper on top of the back and it filled in the places that I had cut out. I've even added some very dimensional resin flowers to this one, which I don't normally do, but I thought fit perfectly on this layout. And this one may end up on my wall. So these heavily dimensional pieces, won't worry about that too much in my albums. Now again, keeping my embellishing very simple and mostly to the wreath itself, not a lot of extra embellishing. We have our title, we have some journaling, but everything else is kind of built into the wreath or is just little scattering bits around the wreath. And so using a wreath is a great way to get big impact without having to do a lot of work, a lot of clustering. In this case though, I have added some additional pieces from other papers on top that I have fussy cut out to again give that idea of layering and dimension on this wreath, give it a really 3D look. Now you do not just have to use florals in your wreath. For example, this one I have stamped around a circle and then cut out another circle in wood grain and placed it right on top. So the stamping adds a nice background layer that really gives it a great shadow to the shape of the wreath. And then I've piled on some florals on top as well as some very sneaky little puppies into each of the big clusters. But the entire wreath doesn't have to be completely filled in, is that every single line has to be covered up. But I think a good majority does in order to differentiate it just from a large shape. Again, keeping the embellishing to the wreath itself, just some simple journaling and a tab and a title. And that's it for the layout itself. Now, even though this is a cut file, it's a very loose wreath. So the wreath doesn't have to be a circle. It can be, in this case, more of a square. But it functions the same way. It frames the inside of your layout, and it gives you a place to focus your embellishing. So in this case, again, the only embellishing inside of the wreath is a small cluster here around my photo and my title. The rest is all embellished on top of the wreath itself. In this case, I have rubbed what looks like possibly distress crayons or gelatos or something like that on top of the cut file, and then just filled in the holes with sequins and hearts and layered some other florals on top as well. So again, the shape of the wreath is not really the defining factor. It's being decorated all the way around. Here's another great example of not just florals. In this case, I have very few florals on this page. I've instead decided to bring in a variety of bits and pieces that I found difficult to use on other layouts. Things like ice cream cones, things like drinks, things like lemons and large glasses. Those are not things that I normally tuck into my clusters, and so I decided to go ahead and use them to create a double ring wreath on this layout. Now, because I've gone ahead and decorated the entire circle, both of them, I am calling it a wreath and not just a large shape. This one is a little bit different because it's on a 9x12. And so because of that, even though it is very centered on the layout, it has an interesting look because you're missing these outside pieces. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I really like the extra white space at the top and bottom, and it gives that vertical layout just beautiful, beautiful differentiation from the 12x12. Now here's another example of a more modestly decorated wreath. This one is of a boy layout, so I've stuck to some very boyish themes as opposed to florals. And because my embellishing here pretty much covers up almost half of the wreath, and then I'm just lightly embellished the rest of the wreath, so it is still fully embellished all the way around, but a lot of that is layering behind my photos. So this is a little different version. I've got 3 photos onto this layout. One of them is popped up onto foam just to give it a little bit of lift, a little bit of dimension, and to focus in on my son in particular on this one. I love using things like enamel dots and buttons to fill in gaps in between some of the larger embellishments. I think that looks really cool. And I really, really enjoyed this one. This is a kind of go-to design for me that typically I reach for florals, but I love to challenge myself to see what other things I can fill a wreath with. This particular wreath actually isn't using a specific one circle shape as well. It has multiple doodly lines going around in a circle, which is a really graphic, cool look for a boy layout. I hope you've enjoyed this go-to design video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to join us every single Saturday for the next month or so to catch all of the go-to designs. I should have about 15 videos in the playlist for this series in case you've missed any. That's it for this one, guys. Until next time, bye.